Hi everybody, welcome to another vlog entry. Today I'm going to talk about chronic illness. So as of late I have been feeling not so great, especially considering I got my first dose of the vaccine and just feeling really under the weather as my immune response kind of does whatever it's doing and just makes me feel very sick. So achy, arthritis is super bad, I've got massive headaches. It's just, you have an autoimmune disease, your body does not react the same way to things as other people's body reacts. So yeah, I was expecting to not feel so good, and even though I was expecting it, it still sucks. So anyway, that's been on my mind a lot. So I figured I'd make it the topic of my vlog for this week. Chronic illness is a condition that lasts for over a year, requires ongoing medical treatment, and or limits your daily activities. An autoimmune disease is when the body attacks itself. So you've got your immune system, and it doesn't only attack, bacterial infections, viruses, whatever, but it also attacks healthy cells in the body. Some common autoimmune diseases are rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, lupus. There is controversy in the medical community on whether endometriosis is considered an autoimmune disease or not. I do have endometriosis, which was confirmed in a laparoscopy surgery procedure about 5 years ago. I'm going to go into detail on this because that's just a whole other video. So endometriosis is not officially recognized as an autoimmune disease, but there is controversy because endo seems to often co-occur with autoimmune diseases and provides a lot of symptoms of an autoimmune disease. So it's unclear on whether endometriosis just makes you more susceptible to have an autoimmune disease, or if endo itself is an autoimmune disease. So there's controversy on that. I know that I do have an autoimmune issue because I have had some tests where they determined that my immune system was attacking healthy cells. I had a high level of this test, but with no actual answer as to what the autoimmune issue was. The prevailing theory that specialists were going with prior to my endometriosis diagnosis was relapse remitting MS, because the symptoms were lining up quite well, but they weren't able to identify any lesions on my brain, so I didn't receive an official diagnosis of it. But yeah, I still struggle with a lot of the same issues I've been struggling with for the last decade and a bit. Severe fatigue, I'm down for the count. I'll talk about it a little bit later in my solutions for it. Yeah, muscle weakness, headaches, that type of stuff. But anyway, that's what an autoimmune disease is when your immune system is fighting healthy cells and it causes inflammation. I will leave some links in the description to some good YouTube videos that explain these a little bit more. So in things like chronic fatigue, they find that the immune system and there's inflammation in certain parts of the brain that's causing a complete energy drain. But anyway, I will leave that for the description. Chronic fatigue is when you get completely exhausted. Now, I don't mean, I'm tired, I've been up for 24 hours straight and I'm just so tired. Chronic fatigue is you are so exhausted, you don't even have the energy to breathe properly. You just, and no amount of sleep helps it. So I have been dealing with fatigue, chronic fatigue, for at least a decade. It's been a very, very long time, probably about a decade and a half at least. I don't remember when exactly it started, but I do know that I didn't always have it. I go through periods sometimes where I'll be okay for a few months and life is great and I can why was I so tired before? But then I'll get into another phase where I'm getting the fatigue again and I'm like, holy crap, this is just insane, because I lose at least half of my waking hours to the fatigue. And when I have the severe fatigue, I have to lay down. There's no standing up. I mean, it's difficult enough to breathe. How am I going to stand or do any other work? you get the severe brain fog, so I can't put two words together. I can't think straight. It's soul crushing exhaustion. For me, it manifests itself in a few ways. One was a fun way of describing it, the post food snoozies, because it would often happen after I'd eaten. So I'd have, even if it was, I remember one time it happened, we were in a restaurant and I had an iced tea of some sort, and then boom, it hit, and I was just like I was just draped over the table, and I had to like be carried out of the restaurant. Like, it is so soul crushing. It is ridiculous. Any partners I've had, I'm sure have a couple stories of having to like carry me out of various areas because I was just so drained and I couldn't even walk myself. Yeah, it's just so it's become so normal to me that even just like talking about it, I'm like, wow, that's really bad. Hearing myself say it out loud, but it's just a reality that I've lived most of my life, with doctors telling me that it's all in your head. Well, I'm sure there's part of it is problem in my brain, but not in the way that they're thinking it is, right? This is not a thing that a sedative is going to fix. And I did actually have at one point a physician tell me that this was all in my head and prescribe me 4 milligrams of lorazepam daily for the rest of my life. Yeah, that was just a classic case of female hysteria right there. So that was fun. Yeah. Another way that this sort of manifests in its sort of lower levels, when I can still function a little bit, but I am still fatigued. I'll have difficulty, like I lose my filter, so I don't necessarily respond in the proper ways in social settings, say things without thinking, that type of stuff. And the worst part of it all is that it seems so random. In my decade and a half of dealing with this chronic fatigue, I have never been able to find and put my finger on, when I do this, that's when I get the fatigue. Or when I do this, this is when I feel good. I have tried everything, changing my diet, cutting out caffeine. I no longer have any alcohol. I don't eat soy. I cut meat out for a while. Like, I did a lot of diet changes and tried those over the years. And recently I thought that it was all endo related. So when I was on the Vizan last year, I remember having so much energy last year when I was on the Vizan. And I thought it was because of the Vizan that was holding back the endo, and so it had gotten rid of my fatigue. But now I've been on Vizan for about 2 months now, and the fatigue is just still constant. And so what I want to do with this vlog entry is sort of give tips and tricks on how I manage to deal with my chronic fatigue and still, be a productive member of society. Now, these are highly specific to who I am and to my situation. So I know that some people with chronic fatigue can't even get out of bed. They're completely bedbound. So that, these strategies may not work for someone who's bedbound. But I just thought I'd share the things that have worked for me in my situation. Prompt number 2. What are my general life philosophies in dealing with chronic illness that is limiting? So the first, I guess, strategy I would say is I had to completely destroy my toxic perception of productivity. I had to really rework what society's opinion of productivity was. That, I used to think that if you can't do a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday work week, then you're just a waste of space. Like, I had some really really toxic ideas on what productivity was. I was raised in a certain way, in a certain type of community, and being in that type of environment when you have a chronic illness, man, it was bad. I can remember when I was in gym class in high school, and I've always had the endometriosis, right? So I would have extremely painful periods, and it was not good. And whenever I had to sit out of activities during gym because I was in so much pain, I was just treated like this lazy person who just didn't want to put in the work and whatnot. There was zero understanding of this type of illness and like the actual reality of the pain that you're in when you have this illness. Yeah, and that was decades before I even got my diagnosis. So yeah, anyway. So as you can imagine, I had some very toxic internalized opinions of how if you cannot be super active all the time, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, then you are just this lazy, terrible person. So I had to like completely destroy that idea and rework it up to, understand that society is sort of malformed a little bit in that regard of just putting too much value on just like this capitalist idea of like labor being the epitome of success of the society. So yeah, I had to do some soul searching in there. I had to do some learning about that. So I had to do some unlearning and relearning of what society is, what we should be doing as individuals in a society, and what productivity is, and what is of value, that type of stuff. The next one would be understanding that it wasn't my fault. So again, with the laziness, right? It's not that I was lazy. It's not that there was some failing on my part in terms of motivation. Like there is something biologically happening that is sapping the energy, or that's causing pain, or it's not all in my head. It was actually something going on. It's a legit physiological issue. The medical field tends to lump these chronic illnesses, especially autoimmune disease, and symptoms like fatigue, muscle weakness, all that stuff. They tend to lump that into psychological issues, and that has its own stigma with mental health of like, oh, it's a failing on your part, and there's a lot of blame that goes into that. There are legit reasons that are beyond our control. If you're surrounded by people who maintain those ideologies that chronic fatigue is not a thing, that autoimmune diseases is just it's a psychological thing, it's just a matter of will, you just have to get up and push through. If you're surrounded by people that have that type of mentality, it's going to be really hard. I was surrounded a lot by people who had that mentality, and what I needed to do was to eliminate them from my life. And it might sound harsh to say that, but literally if you have people like this in your life that are, always subtly putting into the conversation that, oh, you should just try getting more exercise, or you should just drink more water, or like if they're insinuating in any way that this is your fault, that it's a failing of yours somehow, get those people out of your life, because you're not going to be able to treat yourself with kindness and have a good quality of life if you're surrounding yourself with people who are constantly attacking you in a subtle way. So it's basically just poisoning you slowly over time. And that's no way to live, right? I mean, quality of life is super important when you have a chronic illness. And if you surround yourself with people who are diminishing your quality of life by like attacking you psychologically with these things, you're not going to be able to take care of yourself physically when you're constantly putting your effort into defending yourself psychologically. I don't know how else to say it. The next thing I would say is a positive internal monologue. I'm an internal monologuer, so part of the population apparently has an internal voice. Their life is like a monologue. They talk to themselves throughout the day of like, oh, okay, oh, look, there's a piece of paper. Oh, I should probably get up and go to the bathroom. And it's just they talk in their head. Apparently, a large part of the population that doesn't have an internal monologue, that their thoughts don't come out as words in their head. So that seems weird to me. But anyway, I'm an internal monologuer, and for me, a really big key to living with my chronic illness was learning how to control that inner voice, that inner monologue, and to use it as a voice of encouragement. So there's a lot of literature and whatnot on self-parenting, self-soothing. This is all stuff that I guess I came across through dealing with childhood trauma and that type of thing. But my internal voice, which actually used to be very negative, it was really bad. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into it, but it was a war inside me all the time, and I would be so mean to myself and just, yeah. Anyway, I learned to change that, Now, my internal monologue is a very supportive force in my life. So I'll give you an example. If I've been working away at the computer, dealing with some difficult stuff, I recognize that I'm starting to feel a bit off. At this point, I'm able to recognize these symptoms in my body, like, oh, I'm starting to feel a little bit anxious. My breathing's starting to get a bit shallower. I can notice these things sort of subconsciously at this point, and my internal monologue will kick in and be like, oh, you know what, you should have a glass of water, or you should drink some water and maybe go sit down for a little bit. You did a really good job, and I think it's time for a little bit of rest. And so I'll get up and I'll listen to it, just as if it was a parent telling me what to do. Oh, okay, and then I'll get up and I'll go have my glass of water, and then I'll go sit down, and then I'll listen to a little bit more, and then my internal voice will continue. Oh, you did a good job. Why don't we do some reading? Maybe you should, go take a nap. And if you feel better, then we can get back to continuing writing that letter or whatever it was that I was doing. I go back and forth like that with my internal monologue, and I've been doing this for a long time. This didn't just happen like that. I mean, first I had to recognize the negative self-talk, and then learn how to stop it when it was happening, and then that slowly progressed into replacing it. Like, once there was that little vacuum of like, oh, I'm being negative, what do I need to do, then replacing it with something else. And then I started recognizing the symptoms of when I'm starting to get agitated or anxious or whatever it is. So there's a lot of progression here. This didn't happen overnight. This took me years to develop, but it is a really useful force for me now in my life, and is great for dealing with like the toxic productivity. I don't really feel I struggle with that anymore, because my self-talk is just so great around caring for myself, caring for my body and my brain and all this stuff. But I'll digress on that. Now let's get into some more concrete things. It's really imperative to find flexible means of financial security. This was a really, really big one for me. I used to think that because I was so sick and I couldn't do the 9 to 5, that meant that I could never look after myself as a human being. I had to have someone take care of me. So I needed to be in a relationship where a partner would have the income, someone who was able-bodied, that was able to do a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that they would take care of me financially. But of course, that leaves me at the mercy of that person. So that is just a recipe for disaster, and I'm not going to go into that too much. So what I had to do is to find a way to ensure my financial security myself. And the way that I did that was, first, I had to get rid of that idea that it had to be that the only way that you can take care of yourself is if you have a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I can't put in 40-hour work weeks, so what am I going to do? I had to find a flexible means of income. Luckily, our society has shifted from the manual labor factories, which is what started the whole 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So there is a lot of work options that are much more flexible. In my particular case, I am all about education. I love learning. That's my jam. So for me, going to school was sort of a natural fit. And at this point, because I'm in grad school, I now have a funding package. So I chose a university that had a funding package. Not every university has that. The one that I chose, if you got accepted into the program, you are guaranteed a certain amount of money per year. Some of that is through a stipend, like awards, that type of thing, but some of it is through waged employment, like TAing, being a teacher's assistant and TAing undergrad courses. The other thing that I do is I look for as many extra opportunities as possible. So as a full-time student at my university, there are positions that become available through the university as like a work-study program type thing. Just little part-time contracts here and there. To do sort of like admin work or whatnot with the university, but you have to be a full-time student in order to be considered for these positions. What I do is I apply to the ones that I find. So anything, my particular interests, I'm very much into equity, diversity, inclusion, indigenization, teaching, pedagogy, that type of stuff really interests me. And so when positions that deal with that open up, I will typically apply for them, and sometimes I get them, sometimes I don't, but whatever I do get, I supplements my income in addition to the funding package that I get, because the fun is they're not going to be paying their students a large amount of money, right? So I'm still below the poverty line, but it just gives me a little extra money to help cover my bills. And since things have moved more remotely, this has worked so well for me, because now I can truly focus on results versus hours. So if I've got, say, an email to do or emails to write, say I can do that because of the experience that I've got over these years and working in the admin field and secretary stuff for like a decade before going back to university. I've got experience and I'm much quicker at these things. So although, let's say we've got 10 hours allotted to do emails or whatnot, if I can get all those emails done and done very well in 3 hours, then those other 7 hours I can use for rest. And this is a sort of a concept that I first came across in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which was really good. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some unethical stuff in there that I'm not into, but like the general idea of get the work done, like focus on the results, and when you're providing the results to your employer, they'll be happy because you've got the results. Just don't tell them that it didn't take you as long as they think it took you. Now, because that's what the employer wants, right? Is they want the results, not necessarily the hours. When it was factory stuff, sure, it was hours, but now in today's world with the technology, internet, online, all that stuff, it's the results people are looking for, not the hours put in. In the Tim Ferriss book, he focuses all the extra time you get into vacations and whatnot, mini retirements he calls them, but I just I use that as my downtime, as my sick time. So that way, even though I'm sick and I can't perform at the same level and at the same consistency as people who are able-bodied and people who don't have a chronic illness, I can still provide the output that people without the chronic illness have. By using different strategies, I can create the same output in a lesser amount of time than other people do. And if you want to know what those strategies are, again, go read Tim Ferriss's book. I wouldn't have time to cover them all in this video, but go read the book if that interests you. It'll really help you get the output that your job requires, but in a lot less time. That way you can still be productive and still be a good employee and still be a good member of society and feel fulfilled, right? It's not about being productive because that's what society wants. It's more about being fulfilled. I mean, I know personally, I feel better about myself and satisfied when I'm doing something for society and I'm feeling part of the community. So I do that for me, right? I can feel good about myself and not feel depressed that I'm not as able-bodied as everybody else if I'm providing something of value to the community, to society. So yeah, I mean, it's for the society, but it's also for myself to feel good about myself. I don't feel trapped by having to be productive. I feel fulfilled by being able to be productive for whatever my chosen field is. Anyway, I'm probably getting rambly, so I'll just leave it at that and move on. So those are my general life philosophies when it comes to managing and living with a chronic illness that just saps up a lot of my time. Prompt number 3. What are some tips for my day-to-day life?